A couple teams that I want to look at that I think could play spoiler, or on the other hand, could be the spoilee. One of those teams is Notre Dame. And I find it very fascinating where the College Football Playoff Committee ranked Notre Dame at number 8, but we would be the number 9 seed, which, if we're talking about unfairness in these rankings, that would stink because Notre Dame would have to go on the road rather than host a playoff game, which they would be if they were seeded 8, but at 9 would go on the road. But, I digress. It feels to me that the committee is placing Notre Dame kind of in this ranking purgatory to say, prove it to us. You got a prove it game coming up against Army in just a couple of weeks. You beat Army and you beat them handedly. You have your spot. You're sitting cush and cozy and things might move around you, but you have your spot reserved in the college football playoff. If you do not beat Army, and if you don't even do it convincingly even, there is plenty of space for Notre Dame to drop out and for SMU or Texas A&M or Kansas State or Colorado, some of these teams right on the outside looking in, to leapfrog Notre Dame. They're just kind of sitting in no man's land.
Some of those teams you just mentioned are key to this because, again, what have we seen? This is a reactionary committee. You take a big loss, you're going to suffer from it, right? So one thing we know is Notre Dame can't afford a loss anywhere. I will definitively say if Notre Dame loses another game, they're out of the college football playoff. What becomes interesting is what happens if they beat Army in an ugly game, because the committee also for the second straight week is telling you that Army's cute, but Army's not dangerous. Like, they're ranked number 24. For everything that happened that made you think there'd be movement, Army moves up 1. So Army goes to number 24. The committee's still telling you that's not a great football team. If Notre Dame goes into that game and struggles against Army, it's just that they eke out an ugly win, man, they're going to have to suddenly get really nervous because Colorado is not currently in this top 12, and Colorado certainly has a chance to catapult their way in depending on what they do, but Colorado controls their own destiny. So that's a team that's on the outside looking in. I already mentioned Texas A&M is on the outside looking in. Let's see what the committee decides to do with Georgia. Like, here's the thing, where they pocketed Georgia, Georgia's going to be the easiest team in the world to move right up to put in at the bottom of this playoff thing. Georgia's an easy team to sneak in. So if I'm Notre Dame, what I don't want to do is give the committee any mindset of, you know what? You're not as good as Georgia. And if you don't go out there and thoroughly whoop on Army, I think you leave that door open. There's nothing, depending on what everybody else does, I genuinely don't believe it's as simple for Notre Dame as win and you're in. I think Notre Dame's going to have to win the right way, and they're going to have to be very sure that everybody around them either takes care of the chaos or nobody out there creates more chaos with convincing victories of their own.
I still have to think an 11-1 Notre Dame team gets in. Even if it's an ugly, eke-it-out win over Army, that's still a top 25 win. I think it would be crazy if Notre Dame won that game and they did not get in the college football playoff. But to that point, there's a certain extent to which Notre Dame controls their own destiny. They control their own destiny to a certain extent. There's a lot of chaos going on around Notre Dame. I look at the SEC race right now. We have the potential for 7 2-loss conference teams in the SEC. 7. We have the potential for a wild tiebreaker in the SEC to see potentially Alabama and LSU in the in the SEC championship game. Talk about bid thieves. Talk about, the potential for a spot to be taken up by a team that we never thought would have been taken. I just still think an 11-1 Notre Dame team gets in, but the committee has set themselves up where if they want to drop a team 9 spots, they can.
Here's the thing, though. Like, look at the 3 teams right now below them. Miami, Alabama, Ole Miss. Okay, so Miami and SMU likely going to play for the ACC championship game, right? Like, the winner of that is going to get such a significant win. Easy to put them ahead of Notre Dame. They'll get a big resume win. All right, so they move ahead. So that now there's only 2 teams behind them. You just mentioned a path for Alabama to rise their way up. Also, I've said several times, Texas A&M, by the time this thing's done, if they take care of business, they will rise their way up. So that's another slot for them to fall. And now you're sitting there saying, okay, Notre Dame versus Ole Miss and Georgia in this problem. And we don't know what's going to happen with Ole Miss over the course of the rest of this too. So Ole Miss is going to win their way out. So that's just from there. That's just from those individual spots. Now, the other side of it too is Boise State, who, I've given a lot of grief here, is ranked number 13. they're still going to have a Mountain West championship game against the UNLV team that's on the cusp of a top 25 win too. So I can't say, depending on what that game looks like, I can't say that Boise State win. So I can find teams all along in that 4 or 5 slot below Notre Dame that are nipping at the heels that have more runway to get significant wins. And if they're able to get more significant wins, it doesn't take a lot to leapfrog from 7 to 8. To get up from one spot to the next. It doesn't take a ton of room to get there. I think there's a real chance. It would take chaos all over the place, but I believe that could happen.